And welcome to the briefing room. I'm ABC's Devin Dwyer, joined by our Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas, Alex Mellon, our White House reporter, and thank you very much for joining us on this special edition of the briefing room today as the nation pauses to remember the 41st President of the United States, George Herbert Walker Bush. A very touching day of ceremonies, funeral ceremonies here at the National Cathedral. The entire Bush family you see there, all the former presidents in place for the first time since the Trump presidency began more than 2 years ago. Was quite something to see. And then so many symbols of presidential power, unity today, coming together in tradition as this city in the Capitol say goodbye to George Bush, who is now on his way down to Texas where he'll be interred. The plane carrying President Bush, known as Air Force One, set to land in just an hour or so in Houston. That's where our Marcus Moore is. He's just outside of Houston at College Station, Texas, getting ready to receive the former president. Marcus, you're at the Bush Library. That's where George Bush will be buried. But of course, he's got a number of stops on the way there, including a train ride to get to the campus. Tell us what's expected the next few days.
Yeah, that's right, Devin. That train ride will be at the request of the former president. This ride that's expected to take a few hours and will start in the Houston area and will work its way to the north here to College Station, where we are just outside the Presidential Library, where you may be able to see off in the distance the flags there at half-staff and the various stages that have been set up as preparations are underway for the ceremonies that will take place here tomorrow. And I want to show you the platforms that have been set up where various media organizations will be gathering and capturing the moving moments as the world will watch the ceremony unfold and the burial for the former president. And it will start with that train ride that's expected to go through a number of small towns, and that's significant because this is the state of Texas, and while we know the former president was born in Massachusetts, Texas became home, and certainly the Houston area is where many people became accustomed to seeing the former president and the former First Lady Barbara Bush at various events, particularly sporting events. And it's in these small towns where this train will work its way through. It's known as Union Pacific Locomotive 4141. It will go from Spring through to Magnolia and also Navasota, and finally coming to a stop here in College Station, which, by the way, is a town that is named after a train station. It was one of the only train stations in this region, and it's where Texas A&M University is located, which is also the home of the Bush Presidential Library and Museum. So this is a very important place, not only for this region, but also for the former president who decided to put his library here so many years ago. And this place was dedicated back in 1997. And at that time, every living president was there to be here for that very special day. And as he is laid to rest tomorrow, presidents will be here once again to support the family and honor the 41st President of the United States. Devin.
And Marcus, before we let you go, before the president arrives by train to College Station, there will be a smaller family memorial service at the family church in Houston, St. Mark's Episcopal Church. If we saw the star-studded cast of dignitaries parade into the cathedral here in Washington today, tomorrow is expected to be a more personal, smaller crowd of people, but also there will be some musical stars performing. Tell us about that.
And certainly, yes, there will be a number of musical selections, particularly artists from here in Texas that were friends of the former president and who will be performing and playing. And the actual burial itself will be a private event. It won't be open to the public, and that is the way the president wanted it to be, as it will be a very special time. But certainly a number of notable musicians and everyday citizens will be here to take part and really to honor the former president, not only for his policies and certainly his effort to help shape the world that we know today, but really honor a man who was, as everyone has said, was so humble and was just a good person. And it's certainly something that many people here in College Station. I grew up here in this city and certainly saw the former president numerous times here at his library, and so they became certainly a part of the fabric of this community. And that's why you see, and that's why you'll know that the musicians will be here to do what they can to honor, and why everyday people will line not only the rail tracks, but also the roadways here as the president comes to his final resting place, where he will be buried alongside his wife Barbara and their daughter Robin here on the grounds of the Presidential Library.
All right, Marcus Moore for us in College Station. Thank you so much for your reporting, Marcus. And of course, Barbara Bush, who he mentions, Pierre, died just 8 months ago. Those two inseparable 73 years of marriage, an absolutely remarkable relationship. The president will be laid to rest besides her. And time and again today in the remembrances at the ceremony, which you watched closely, you've been covered politics in this town for a long time, covered the Bush administration. We heard about these personal bonds that President Bush forged both with family, with friends, with politicians to bridge that divide. It's something we really haven't seen in presidents since.
Really, and I think looking at the relationship between President Herbert Walker Bush and Barbara, that endures in our minds. If those of us who've been in this town, they had a connection that was plain for everyone to see. His style was one of humility, not a boastful person at all. I was struck today by the many references to his military service, how he was shot down over the Pacific, lost 2 of his crew members, and that seemed to strike a chord with him in terms of how he would live his life. Not a man without mistakes, but a person who talked about growing from the mistakes. And I think the thing that was not lost on many people today in watching the ceremony is that, yes, he played hardball politics as well, but there was an ability to say in key moments that we're all Americans.
That sense of unity certainly did come through. The flaws of the president, even mentioned in his eulogies by his eulogists today, he was also not free from scandal, as you guys both know. Speaking of scandal, to shift gears a little bit, this town, while we were paying respects to George Bush today, big headline overnight in the scandal that has embroiled this presidency, the current presidency, President Trump, the Russia investigation, Pierre. There were some major developments overnight. The special counsel releasing the sentencing memo for Michael Flynn, that's the former National Security Advisor. We learned some new details in there. Tell us what your big takeaways were from this.
Well, Michael Flynn is the only senior White House aide who's cooperated with the special counsel. Pled guilty to lying about his contacts with that Russian ambassador during the transition period, lying about the nature of a phone call with the ambassador in which the ambassador was asking questions about the Obama sanctions, which were levied in response to the hack on the 2016 election. Flynn was not honest about that, but Mueller went out of his way in that filing to say that he's cooperated fully, completely, so much so that the Mueller team is not recommending any jail time for him, which is pretty interesting. The other thing that we took from...
What do you make of all that? I mean, people look at this and they go, here was the first person charged by Bob Mueller, somebody who was in the Trump administration, not just the campaign or transition. This person lied about contacts with the Russians, and yet he came clean, and now he's not going to go into prison. What does that mean for the president?
Well, here's the thing. The details are what's fascinating. Michael Flynn had 19 sessions with the special counsel and other investigators, 19. These sessions are typically several hours each, so we're talking about dozens and dozens of hours of apparently giving chapter and verse about many subjects that the special counsel wanted to know. And apparently the special counsel and his team were pleased with the information that they got, felt like it was forthcoming, and we learned some new details in terms of confirmation on some things. It confirmed that the special counsel has been heavily focused on the transition team and who on the transition team were having communications with Russians. They say that specifically, and that Michael Flynn provided, quote, content and context of those communications and those interactions.
We just don't know the detail of what those conversations were precisely about.
Lots of redactions.
And a lot of black on those pages.
Lots of black on those pages. And then some cryptic references to at least potentially two other investigations, which Mueller gave no details about. So clearly they painted this man as a key cooperating witness who has helped them significantly, so much so that other witnesses Again, Mueller didn't say who those witnesses are, but that other witnesses came forward and were cooperative, in part because Michael Flynn agreed to cooperate
And Alex,
early.
the White House watching this very closely. The president hasn't tweeted about the Flynn memo just yet. He did many months ago tease that he possibly could pardon Michael Flynn if he needed to. But what are you hearing from White House officials in response to this?
Well, I think it'll be interesting at least to see what the separate tracks are for somebody that the president was praising over Twitter the other day for not cooperating with Mueller's investigation, Roger Stone. And we saw Roger Stone earlier this week say that he's going to plead the fifth in his testimony to Congress. He will not testify with Congress. So it'll be interesting to see now what track Roger Stone will take in terms of how his results are with the Mueller investigation, with what Congress might do to maybe pressure him to testify, and see how those results might be different from what we saw with Flynn, who's being now essentially hailed by the special counsel as a good cooperating witness.
All right, much.
And Devin, it's a big week. Not only do we get the sentencing
Took
memorandum.
the words right out of my mouth. It's going to be a big Friday.
Right. Not only do we get the sentencing memorandum in relation to Michael Flynn, on Friday we expect to hear much more detail about why Michael Flynn is in trouble again with the special counsel. They're going to give some details about
Paul Manafort.
In terms of why they think that he lied to them after he got his deal and was supposed to be cooperating. They're going to give some details supposedly about crimes he allegedly committed. Also, Michael Cohen, the one-time attorney and so-called fixer for President Trump, sentencing memorandum expected to be released on him as well. So we may get some more detail, but one thing we know, Mueller's only showing what he wants us to know at this point.
And a long way to go, but a lot coming into focus this week. And Pierre, we know you'll stay on it. Thank you so much. And your report coming up on World News Tonight and World News Prime right here on ABC News Live at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You can tune in for that, Pierre. Thank you. Meanwhile, another major story popping overnight, of course, was the shock, the fallout from the stock market plunge yesterday. 800 points on the stock market, the fourth biggest single point loss on a given day in American stock market history. It was quite something. The markets rattled because of President Trump's mixed messages on a potential trade deal with China. This on the heels of that G20 summit where the president had dinner with Chinese President Xi. Thought he came up with some sort of a deal, Alex Mallon. Those tweets yesterday, the president said, "I'm the tariff man." That's what really set this off. Then today, we've got Operation Cleanup.
Yeah, it seems like the president now is trying to shed more optimism on the results of that deal with China. The president tweeted that he's seeing, quote, very strong signals sent by China once they returned home from their long trip. And he said, not to sound naive or anything, but I believe President Xi meant every word of what he said at our long and hopefully historic meeting. Now, remember, the president coming out of that meeting said that he considered it a great leap forward. He said that there was a deal, and it made it sound like there was some sort of grand bargain, and we saw the stock market really react to that. And so what we saw over the subsequent past 3 days was a reaction to what seemed like there wasn't a lot of meat on the bones of this deal. We saw the president's national economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, in a conference call with reporters telling them that essentially what the president said. He said that that China had agreed to eliminate their tariffs on automobiles almost completely, and he said that there had been no agreement that had been reached to that effect. He also stumbled a bit and said that this 90-day countdown that they had set, and essentially when the tariffs would be reinstated, he said that would start a month later than it actually is starting. And the president even had to play his own little bit of cleanup. So really, I think the stock market kind of seeing in real time the results of this muddled messaging by the White House.
Yeah, most analysts looking for some reassurance. If you know anything about investors, they like certainty. They like to know what the policies are going to be that are going to affect the markets. And they saw the president sending those mixed signals today. As you say, Alex, the president trying to offer some reassurance that a deal is, in fact, still on the table with China. 90 days to go on that one. We'll be watching it closely. Alex, thank you very much for that reporting. I want to shift gears now a little bit to another major political story that developed overnight. It may have caught you by guard. If you haven't heard about it, it's going on in Wisconsin. This is the continuing fallout from the midterm elections as Democrats swept all statewide offices in Wisconsin. Well, Republicans, which control the legislature and the governorship until January, decided to take some action and limit Democrats' power. Sounds a little complicated, but we've got our Johnny Verhoeven, ABC political reporter, is on the case. Johnny joins us now. Johnny, give us the bottom line about what's happening in Wisconsin and why we should care this afternoon.
Yeah. Well, you're right, Devin. The Democrats won big in Wisconsin in 2018. Democrat Tony Evers ousted Republican sitting Governor Scott Walker, who's a familiar name, obviously, in Republican politics. What's going on right now amid widespread protests in the state is pretty shocking. So the Republican state legislature, overnight tonight and then this morning, passed a pretty sweeping plan that would sweep Evers, the Democrat who's going to come into office next year, strip him of some major powers and authority over some areas of state government. One provision would strip Evers' power to withdraw the state from a big lawsuit against the Affordable Care Act that a bunch of other Republican state attorneys general have joined. Another provision would move the state's presidential primary up, and another provision would limit early voting in the state. All are things that Democrats have opposed, but Republicans passed the plan this morning. Evers, who, like I said, is going to take office next year, has called the plan an embarrassment, and Democrats in the state have threatened legal action if Republicans go through with the plan, which Governor Walker is expected to sign at some point in the next 10 days. You see Governor-elect Evers' statement there, calling it a power play by power-hungry politicians rushing these sweeping changes through. So it's a pretty heated situation. Which is also similar to a situation we're seeing going on in Michigan, and also harkens back to a situation that we saw in North Carolina in 2016 when a Republican incumbent also lost and the state legislature tried to limit some of the powers there, but then that was actually ruled unconstitutional by a state court there in North Carolina. Devin?
Yeah, Johnny, thank you. I mean, a local story for sure for those folks in Wisconsin, Michigan, as you say, but obviously big national political ramifications. These are two key states that helped deliver President Trump his win in 2016, and they'll be hotly contested coming up in 2020 as well. Johnny, thank you so much. The politics in those states certainly important to keep tabs on in light of the outcome of the 2018 election, and we will have much more at abcnews.com from our political team. Meanwhile, moving on, we'll end today here in the briefing room with an interesting story in the middle of this holiday season as you're getting ready to pack up your packages, ship them off to your gift recipients. The U.S. Postal Service, at the direction of President Trump, is out with a new task force looking into the Postal Service, is recommending that the Postal Service raise their shipping rates, particularly for commercial mailers like Amazon and other corporations sending a lot of gifts this holiday season. Our Quinn Owen is out at the post office here in Washington today. He's been reporting on this story. Quinn, this sort of came out of left field, but the timing is particularly impactful to a lot of people here.
Well, that's right, Devin. This report coming just as the holiday season is in full swing, and it's unclear exactly when these rate increases might take effect. But this report was initiated by a Trump executive order earlier this year. It created a task force to look into some of the profitability struggles of the Postal Service. And this is the product. They're recommending broad rate increases, which could include online retailers. Online retailers like Amazon.com, as you know, Quinn, which the president has bashed. Let's take a look at some of his recent commentary on that, tweeting just a little bit earlier this year that he wanted the Postal Service to ramp up those rates, to single out Amazon. He called them their delivery boy, getting a discount on the backs of the American taxpayer. What have you been hearing from analysts on that point, Quinn? Is there any truth to this, that Amazon is getting special treatment?
Well, this report does not single out Amazon or any retailer for that matter alone, but it does say that it does lay the groundwork, however, for possibly increasing rates from all large corporate shippers. And that could, of course, include Amazon and other companies. Trump, as you mentioned, has called out Amazon specifically and has said the Postal Service has gotten, quote, poorer and dumber as they've continued to allow Amazon to ship items at rates that Trump says are far too low. The report does say that packages have not been priced with, quote, profitability in mind, and it aims to fix that. It falls a bit short of calling for total privatization of the Postal Service, but some critics of this review have said it does just that. It's a step towards privatization.
a step towards it. Of course, the rate increases, as you say, not necessarily imminent, but certainly being pushed by the Trump administration. Quinn Owen, thank you so much, as the Postal Service grapples with a huge deficit in 2018, $62 billion. So watch out when you go to the Postal Service for potentially higher rates coming soon. We'll stay on that story. And finally today, we want to go back to the events of the day that have gripped the nation's capital as everyone is saying their final farewells to President George H.W. Bush. We have put together some of the highlights of the day, those big moments of the day that you may have missed. We hope we'll leave you with that now, and we'll hope to see you back here tomorrow at 3:30 Eastern in the briefing room. Thanks so much.
George Herbert Walker Bush was America's last great soldier statesman, a 20th century founding father. He believed that to whom much was given, much is expected.
No occupant of the Oval Office was more courageous, more principled, and more honorable than George Herbert Walker Bush.
Loyalty to his country, loyalty to his family, loyalty to his friends. None of us were ready for this day.
He stood in the breach in Washington against unthinking partisanship. He stood in the breach against tyranny and discrimination, and on his watch, a wall fell in Berlin. A dictator's aggression did not stand, and doors across America opened to those with disabilities. An imperfect man, he left us a more perfect union.
He was a class act from birth to death. The most decent and honorable person I ever met was my friend George Bush, one of nature's noble men.
There are wooden ships, there are sailing ships, there are ships that sail the sea. But the best ships are friendships, and may they always be.
Last Friday, when I was told he had minutes to live, I called him. The guy answered the phone, said I think he can hear you, but he hadn't said anything for most of the day. I said, Dad, I love you, and you've been a wonderful father. And the last words he would ever say on earth were, I love you too. To us, he was close to perfect. When the history books are written, they will say that George H.W. Bush was a great president of the United States. So through our tears, let us know the blessings of knowing and loving you, a great and noble man, the best father a son or daughter could have. And in our grief, let us smile knowing that Dad is hugging Robin and holding Mom's hand again.